I pulled out some of my Straw Hat Perla bead art. I have the Straw Hat Jolly Roger. I have Nami's tattoo, and I have a berry because I'm actually going to talk about Nami today, as you probably deduced by the thumbnail. I'm also going to talk about Arlong. Um, so, um, Recently in One Piece, obviously, in the anime, we recently had the moment where Nami finished off Ulti, and we saw how angry she got when Ulti hurt Tama, and everything that went along those lines, and how angry she was with Caesar and stuff for what happened at Punk Hazard with the kids there. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, well, a little bit, lot, give or take, what I think will happen if Nami sees Arlong again. I was doing all of those, and I'm not quite done with them, but like the different One Piece reunions with the Straw Hats reuniting with, past friends and stuff like that. And I was debating about doing a bit where I talk about them reuniting with different enemies, like Chopper seeing Wapol again, which, considering the fact that Wapol is currently with Vivi and Morgan, there's the possibility that Chopper might see Wapol again. And I I don't think Chopper's gonna be scared of Wapol. Um, Chopper can punt Wapol at this point in time. I don't see Chopper having an issue with that. Um, but I wanted to talk about, and we're kind of seeing a little bit with, it's like the Straw Hats seeing, Lucci and Kaku again and that type of stuff. And, Luffy kind of, had like the reunion with Crocodile where he saw him and impel down and everything that happened there. But, a lot of the East Blue villains, we kind of don't know what happened to them. Like, you know, Morgan, different Morgan, Helmeppo's dad, just kind of, wandered off on a boat. Kuro, we don't know where he is. He could be in prison. He could have, been captured by the Navy. He could be off working on another set of plans. Whatever. We know where Buggy is. He's currently being used as a footstool slash lackey by Crocodile and Mihawk in the Cross Guild. Alvida is there as well. Um, and Krieg is most likely dead wherever Geen is. I don't know. I don't want Geen to be dead, but I'm not going to be surprised if he is. But one of the other ones that we really don't know what happened to them was Arlong. So, kind of the last update that we got on Arlong was part of the cover story that we got with Hachan, where he escaped the prison ship that was, Arlong and the rest of the Arlong pirates, Karubi, Chu, and the other ones and everything, and how they were being taken off somewhere. Hachan managed to escape, and then he goes on his, whole adventure and ends up meeting Kami and Papagu, and then they start a takoyaki stand where they're technically selling octopus made by an octopus merman. So, yeah, fishmen. And then, of course, we see when, Hachan and Nami are reunited. And that is kind of one of those moments where, you know, retrospectively, Nami even says when she's, when the Straw Hats, come across, Hachan being held captive by, I think it's by the Mako pirates and Dufeld and his gang, um, you know, because Kami asked them to help save her friend, and then they get there, and then like Nami's like, wait a second, I recognize his voice. And then I think it was like Sanji or Zoro that shouts out, hey, what's Arlong up to? And Hachan's just like, oh, I don't know, he was on the prison ship and I managed to escape. Oh, I have no idea who Arlong is. And Nami just kind of has this moment where she's like, and like the rest of the crew, like particularly, Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji, they all look at Nami and like it's kind of up to her at that point in time whether or not they actually save Hachan, because they know the past that Nami has with Hachan. Kami doesn't really know at this point in time. She ends up getting it pieced together later where it's explained to her and she learns about that past. But Nami kind of like thinks for a moment and she goes, yeah, sure. We'll help him. We told Kami we would. He wasn't as bad, I guess, as Arlong and the others. So sure, yeah, we'll save him. And and they save Hachan and everything happens with Sanji and Duval and everything. And then, you know, Hachan, they're making the takoyaki and everything for them as like a thank you. And Nami tries it, and Hachan's just like, I just, he's like, so what do you think of it, Nami? And like, she says she likes it. But he's like, he even goes like, it doesn't mean that you have to like it. It doesn't mean I'm forgiven or anything like that. I'm just, I just wanted to know whether or not you like the food. And Nami's like, yeah, it's actually really good. And then of course Hachan goes through and goes with them to Saba Odi and everything, and is like helping take them to Shaki and everything. And while the crew is there, they learn about how much of the slavery that the fishmen have been through and everything. And Nami, I don't remember if it's Nami is the one that pieces it together, or it's through something that like Hachan kind of explaining some of it, where they see the Saba Odi archipelago and explaining how when they were kids, him and Arlong and a bunch of the other ones that were the Arlong pirates would swim up to the surface and like look at Saba Odi and see this place that looked amazing, but they couldn't go there, and that Arlong Park is based off of Saba Odi to a degree in some of its design structure and stuff like that. And like Nami kind of, I don't know if Nami figures that out, but like as the audience, it's kind of shown to us that that's what Arlong based it off of. And, what ends up happening is, of course, Kami gets kidnapped, and Hachan and the others are trying to find her. And of course they get to the auction house, and they're there trying to save her. And then, Charlos is there, and then he shoots Hachan, and Nami just is like horrified by this, just like the rest of the crew is at seeing this. And, Nami is definitely one of those characters that is smart enough to know what the celestial dragons are even before they end up interacting with them at Saba Odi. It's just not something that she's ever had a reason to bring up. Like, yeah, out of all the Straw Hats that probably up to that point in time knew what the celestial dragons were, Nami definitely, Robin definitely, Sanji probably, most of the, like, Luffy didn't know what they were, Zoro didn't really know what they were. Frankie possibly could know who they were, know more about the celestial dragons and everything, or have more of a concept of what they were. Brooke, maybe. Usopp possibly, since he does probably reads the newspaper a lot, but I don't know. Chopper probably wasn't really all that aware of them in his frame of reference and stuff like that, just because they weren't something that they ever thought they'd have to deal with. But like Nami and Robin, just because like they read the newspaper so much and are probably up to date quite a bit on like current events and what's going on in the world and stuff like that, they would probably know. And Luffy punches Charlos. Insert reason to show images of Luffy punching Charlos, because I will do that as much as I can. And then they get Hachan and Kami out of there with Rayleigh's help and everything, and just cause all this huge chaos at the auction house. And then after that, after seeing what happened there, Nami actually starts, she kind of, pretty much the rest of her lingering animosity against Hachan is gone, because she gets much more of a better idea of what he's been through. And that he clearly has changed, since their last interaction at Arlong Park. And she starts to treat him like a genuine friend. And then after the time skip, when she sees Hachan again, she shows that she's forgiven him and everything, and I think she even tries to help take care of him when he's wounded because of Vanderdecken. So we get those things there where we see that like that's gotten better. And then of course during that time frame as well, when they're down in Fishman Island, we have it where she ends up interacting with Jinbei for the first time. Now, as the audience, we were introduced to Jinbei, the concept of him way back in just prior to Arlong Park by Yosaku. And he's explaining, about the 7 warlords and how Jinbei's one of them, and how him and Arlong were like once crewmates, and now Arlong's here, and blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, as the audience and as the reader, we got to see, Luffy interacting with Jinbei and everything that happened in Impel Down and with Ace, and then on Amazon Lily and everything. And then how Jinbei was very helpful in, getting Luffy back on track and everything. And, this is the first time that Nami is meeting Jinbei. And Jinbei, at that point in time, I do believe he knows because he's talked to Hachan, and Hachan has explained to him about Jinbei, about Nami's past with Arlong and the East Blue. And, Jinbei ends up apologizing to her and saying that he knows about what happened, but at the time, because Arlong kept bribing Nezumi to, keep everything quiet about how bad he was, acting in the East Blue, information didn't get back to, Jinbei, or he would have shown up and tried, taken out, Arlong and everything and, put it into it. But he wasn't aware of it because the information didn't get back to him. And he didn't find out about it until, probably Hachan explained it to him. And, eventually, Jinbei and Nami have this talk, and of course Jinbei gives them the big flashback about, the Fishman Island flashback about Otohime and Fisher Tiger and everything that happened there and all of that. And Nami gets to hear about Arlong's past from a different perspective than she's used to, because, pretty much for her, Arlong didn't exist until he showed up in Kokoyashi Village when she was a child, and then ransomed her town, and then shot her mother in front of her, and then kidnapped her, branded her with his mark, and said, okay, you're part of my crew now, you're going to draw maps for me, and then if you can earn 100 million berries, then I'll sell you back your town. But until then, you're mine. And, and we saw all of that happened in, during the East Blue and everything like that, how, how Nami would act, much more carefree around just this, Luffy and Zoro and Usopp and everything. And then, she headed off back to, Kokoyashi Village and stole the Mary and, went back there. And then we see how much she just does like this 180 flip with how cold and just emotionless to a degree that she becomes when she talks to the little kid. And then when she gets into Arlong Park and sees Arlong and everything, and we see the mark, the brand that's still on her and everything. And we, and then we get her flashback later, a little bit later on from Nojiko, who explains it to us and everything, explains it to the crew and, the audience and stuff. And why Nami is the way that she is. And we see that Nami has to put up this front amongst the townsfolk, and she has to put up, because like she doesn't know that they actually know why she's doing this. And against Genzo and the doctor and the others and everything, and she thinks the only one that actually knows about her plan outside of, Arlong and stuff is Nojiko, but Nojiko, of course, told the rest of the village because they made her tell them. And then the rest of the village has to give Nami the cold shoulder whenever she shows up, even though they don't want to. They want to do what they can to help her. And, we see, Nami pulls off the act of, stabbing Usopp by stabbing her own hand and everything else that happens. And we get all of that during the Arlong Park arc. And, when we see all of that, and then we see how much Nami just tries to do what she can to, like, not let the rest of the village get hurt, even though it's kind of just like, Nojiko got shot and everything else, and they're just like, no, we're tired of dealing this, we're going to go deal with Arlong. And then, of course, Nami, starts stabbing her own shoulder, and then Luffy stops her, and then she finally asks for help, and of course, him and the rest of the crew go off, and they do help. And, they take down Arlong, and Luffy just destroys Arlong Park and everything. And I think one of my favorite images out of that is the moment when, or like the favorite scenes in that, is when Luffy and Arlong are inside of the room that Nami had spent a good chunk of the last 10 whatever years of her life in, where she's been drawing maps, and we just see these stacks of maps all over the place and see charts and everything like that all over the place. And like Luffy's sitting there on the ground with like Arlong's shark tooth saw blade sword, whatever thing that looks pretty cool, but somewhat not like the most logical version of a weapon, but okay. People fight with a lot of things in One Piece as their chosen form of a weapon, so who am I to judge? I am not a combat expert by any means. Um, and what happens is Luffy's just like looking around at the room, and like we've gotten some flashbacks where we see, Arlong, forcing Nami to keep writing and drawing the maps, even though she's tired of forcing her to stay in the room until she's done with certain maps, of, getting angry at her if she like messes something up on purpose and all of that. And what ends up happening is Luffy just like looks around the room and he grabs the shark blade saw thing, and just his anger. And I wouldn't be surprised if like maybe he tapped into a tiny little bit of armament hockey at that point in time and just cracks it and destroys the blade. And then he just proceeds to start destroying the room. And, we see the desk fly out of the window and all the papers and everything. And Arlong's like, well, why are you doing this? This is like Nami's life's work that she's been working on. And Luffy's like, this room holds nothing but horrible memories for her. Even if she's drawn all these maps, it wasn't because she wanted to. And he destroys them all, sends them flying out the windows all over the place. And we just see like some of the relief on Nami's face as she sees so much of that getting destroyed in front of her, as the rest of the village and the rest of the crew at that point in time are watching this moment. And then, of course, Luffy, just destroys Arlong Park, and then Arlong is just, like, on the ground, defeated. And then, supposedly, he is arrested by the Marines. At, some point in that time frame, he gets arrested by the Marines, and then that's when Hachan escaped after the rest of the crew was taken prisoner. And then we have no idea where they ended up. We know that, currently in the story that Nami forgave Hachan, and then we know that during everything that happened in Fishman Island that Nami, forgave Jinbei. She's like, I can't hold on to my past. There's no point in resenting it. It kind of made me who I am and everything. And, I'm not going to hold that against all fishmen and everything. Which is one of my favorite Nami moments, because it's like, of every single one of the Straw Hats, she would be the one that would have the most reason to hate the fishmen, and she does not. She does not hold any animosity against the fishmen and the merfolk as a whole, even though with everything that she went through with Arlong and all of that, she holds nothing against Kami when she meets her. She doesn't blame Kami for being friends with Hachan. She's forgiven Hachan. She doesn't hold anything against Jinbei up to that point in time, and she gets another perspective on Arlong. And then later on when they're at, Whole Cake Island and everything, Nami and Nami and Jinbei make a great team there and everything, and just how they interact with each other. And of course, when Jinbei arrives at Wano and everything on the way to Onigashima, everybody's so happy to see him, and Nami's just like, Jinbei, and she hugs him and everything. So we see that there's not that animosity there for Nami. But then there's the question of what's going to happen if Nami sees Arlong again. So I wanted to go over some possibilities and, possible places where Arlong could be. He could just be in some prison in the East Blue. That's a possibility. And he just may never be brought up again. Or he could have managed to escape sometime after Hachan did. Maybe the rest of the, Arlong pirates managed to escape and they just went and set up a different place somewhere else, as opposed to returning to Kokoyashi village and everything. They could be in Impel Down, but given the fact that, that was several months, what happened in the East Blue was several months before Luffy would have ended up in Impel Down anyway. And considering Arlong's bounty at that point in time was the highest in the East Blue, it would have made sense for them to put him in Impel Down along with the rest of the crew. But during the Impel Down arc, we never see Arlong or any of the rest of the crew members there. So that stands to reason that they're most likely not there, because if they were, they would have either been part of the group that managed to escape at some point in time during the prison riot, or because, Luffy pairing up, teaming up with, Buggy and Mr. 3 and everything, there's that. And then, of course, Mr. 2 is just, perfectly fine with them, that teaming up. And then there's, of course, Crocodile and everything. And yes, Crocodile had a lot of emotional trauma that he did to Vivi and everything, but I don't know if Luffy would have been willing to work with Arlong had Arlong been an Impel Down. And Arlong definitely would not have been a level 6 prisoner. I think his bounty was like 20 million or 25 million. I don't remember exactly. At that point in time, because like Luffy's first bounty was 30 million and Arlong's I think was a little bit less than that, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. I don't know that 100%. But what ends up happening is, if Luffy had found Arlong in Impel Down, I don't know if he would have been willing to let him out. Let him out of like whatever cell or out of his cuffs or whatever. But Luffy, I don't think would have done that. But considering how much Buggy and Mr. 3 were running around, had they run into Arlong, I think Arlong would have been very easily able to convince them to, unlock his cell and unlock his cuffs and everything. He wouldn't have had Sea Prism Sun's cuffs on him because he's not he doesn't have a devil fruit. But, he probably would have had cuffs on him at some point anyway. But, I can definitely see that being the case, that he would have at least been able to convince Buggy and Galdino to free him and then make him part of the prison riot. And then Arlong would have just escaped and like swam off into the ocean as soon as he could have, probably with like the rest of his crew, because we do see that Arlong does care about the rest of his crew, about Karubi and Chu and the rest of the group and, Hachan and everything. He does care about them. But had Arlong been there, given the fact that we just had Luffy interact with Hachan in, like 2 arcs previously and everything, that it would have made sense for if Arlong wasn't impelled down, it would have made perfect sense for Luffy to see him and interact with him. But that didn't happen. So probably not an impel down. Dead is another option. Arlong could be dead. Either he succumbed to injuries or whatever that were caused by Luffy, or he could have been killed by the Marines or something like that in an attempt to escape wherever they were taking him, and it just wasn't something that they needed to put into the news because it like makes the Marines look bad or whatever, that like a pirate was attempting to escape and everything. There's that. But given everything that we've learned about the One Piece world over the last several years, since our introduction to Arlong, pretty much not going to be at all surprised if Arlong is at Marijois, is a slave at Marijois. Because we know that when Jinbei became a warlord, that part of his stipulation was that he wanted to have all of the fishmen and merfolk slaves freed from Marijois and have them returned. And that was what happened. And then, of course, we saw everything that happened with Milzagard and all of that, and him going down to try to get them back. And, of course, that leads to Otohime stuff. And Milzagard being, an ally now. But that doesn't mean that applies to other pirates, the other fishmen that are pirates that get captured by the world government. And yes, we know about the Sun Pirates, and then there was the Arlong Pirates, and then there was the Mako Pirates, which also split off from the Sun Pirates along with the Arlong Pirates. And then there was Vanderdecken and his group. And then there was Hody and his group, who were like the New Fishmen Pirates, or whatever they were called. So, that part's not all that surprising. We know that Hody and his group were captured by Neptune and everything down there at Fishman Island, and that's where they are. But I can't see the world government, particularly, those that are corrupt individuals, from capturing Arlong after he's been defeated by Luffy and the rest of the, seeing the rest of Arlong's crew, capturing them. Hachan manages to escape, and then they're just like, you know what? A bunch of these fishmen would probably make the Celestial Dragons pretty happy. They like having fishmen as slaves and everything, so why don't we send them to Marijois? Or somewhere within transit, they ran into some corrupt individual within the Marines We've seen corrupt individuals in the Marines. This is not a surprise if this happens. And they end up at Marijois. And Arlong and the rest of his crew are now slaves. That would not surprise anyone, I don't think. It certainly wouldn't surprise me. And a good amount of the fan base, I don't think, would be surprised by that. But my thought is that at some point in time, I'm not going to be surprised if the Straw Hats end up at Marijois. Either having to confront Sama at some point in time there, or whatever the case may be, after they figure out the One Piece, maybe they have to go there and get something. They have to get the giant straw hat or something. I don't know. But they end up having to go to Marijois. Maybe they're teamed up with the Revolutionary Armies at this point, Revolutionary Army at this point in time, any remnants of the Marines that have like maybe left the Marines at that point in time, like the sword factions and stuff like that. We don't know. But like they end up at Marijois somehow. And part of what Nami wants to do is she wants to go and help Jinbei free the slaves that are there. And like her and Jinbei and maybe some of the others, part of their group or whatever, go and work on trying to get all of the slaves out of there. You know, Jinbei being able to like rip off all the slave collars would make perfect sense so they don't explode. Him having that level of hockey mastery would make perfect sense. Or them getting the keys and doing everything that they can to get them all free. And I can see that, like, we just see them releasing so many, other fishmen and merfolk and other just people in general, other races, a bunch of, minks and whatever. And then they get into a certain area and they start unlocking the cuffs there. And, Nami has Zeus with her and he's like maybe, keeping everything, lit and everything at that point in time so they can see what they're doing. Or maybe it's in the middle of the day that they're doing this when they attack or something. I don't know. And they come across the cell and they open the cell and then Nami hears a voice that she has not heard in a long, long time. And her and Jinbei both freeze. And they look and they see Arlong, maybe Karubi and Chu and the rest of them or some of the others. Maybe Hachan is with Nami during all of this. I don't know. But she sees Arlong. And I can see for a moment that she is once again that little girl who watched her mother die in front of her. And then went through all of those years of torture. For a moment, she is that little girl again, staring at this fishman, this being that caused her so much pain. So much pain. And I can see for that moment, she is just like, she's that child again. With the new brand on her and just scared out of her mind. And then, like, maybe Zeus says something like, Nami, are you okay? And she feels the climb attack in her hand and she has Zeus and she knows that she has Jinbei with her. And, like, maybe Jinbei puts his hand on her shoulder or something. And, like, Nami. Because, like, Jinbei would know. Jinbei knows about the past between Nami and Arlong. And, like, Arlong is just like, what, you come here to finish the job that the world government started? Or whatever. And, like, Arlong's, like, probably beaten and bruised at this point in time. Because I don't see Arlong being the good, obedient slave. I don't see that. Beyond when it, like, benefits him. I don't see him doing that. Because that's just completely antithesis to what he is. To his character. And, like, it takes Nami a moment to snap out of it. And she goes over and, like, maybe she has the keys. And she goes over to Arlong. And she just, like, unlocks the cuffs and whatever else, the chains on him and the rest of them. And, like, she looks him in the eye, and I can see she goes, I'm not scared of you anymore. With everything I've done, with all the enemies and the battles that I've gone through, and the enemies that I've faced, you don't scare me anymore. I have my friends, and I know where my strength is. but that doesn't mean that I want to see you here, and that doesn't mean that I want to see you dead or suffering. At least not like this. Because if Arlong wasn't just prison and like he wasn't being tortured and stuff like that, like I think Nami would be okay with that, but not the way that they're treated in Marijois, not the way that the slaves are treated there. And I can see Arlong is just like flabbergasted by this, and like he's looking at Jinbei and he's looking at Nami, and he's just like, I can see for a moment he actually like pins her, like grabs her neck and like pins her, and like she's just like, she's not scared because she knows what she's capable of now. We've seen everything that Nami is capable of up to this point in time. We've seen what she's able to do with Zeus, with all of the Thunderbolts, and with her Weather Eggs, and with her Climate Attack, and everything. We know what Nami is capable of at this point in time. And whether or not she ever ends up actually learning hockey is left up for debate. I think a little bit of armament hockey would be good for Nami, but, I can see that she is not scared at all at that point in time with Arlong, even if he has her like pinned. And like Arlong for a moment, like he wants to see that terrified little girl, but he doesn't. He doesn't see that terrified little girl anymore. And I would never see Arlong as asking Nami for forgiveness. That is not something that is within Arlong's character. Hachi's character, yes. Jinbei's character, yes. Arlong, I don't see that with Arlong at all. Not in the slightest. But he's like, why are you here? And like Jinbei's like, we're here because us and the Straw Hats are here to free all of the slaves and to take down Marijois, to take down the Celestial Dragons for everything that they've done. And if you want to help, you can. And if you want to leave, you can. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to hunt you down and make sure that you do get punished for what you did to Nami and for the other people in the East Blue. But for now, we need your help. And I can see Arlong and the others are just like, fine, we'll help. And then I can see at some point in time Arlong does something, tries to do something stupid, and then Nami just electrocutes him with Zeus. But I mean, whatever moment when Nami would end up seeing Arlong again, I can see at first she would be that little girl again, and then she would have the realization where she's just like, I have come so far with everything I've done, with everything I've learned, and everything that I can do. Arlong doesn't scare me anymore. I can see that. I can very much see that being the case. And that's what helps snaps her out. What would help snap her out of that moment where she's like that little girl again, looking at the man who killed her mother. And so I can see that happening, and I can see Nami definitely, should Arlong and the rest of the pirates be at Marijois as slaves, I can see her freeing them. And like having Jinbei be there, and like Arlong finding out that Jinbei joined Luffy's crew and all of that other stuff, and just like seeing Arlong's like horror and like anger at that, but also just like Arlong's just also been beaten so much at that point in time in regards to dealing with the Celestial Dragons and everything that maybe he just doesn't want to fight anymore. I mean, depending on stuff, if he did end up at Marijois, he's been there for at least 2 years at this point in time. But it would also give him a moment, and if Koala was there as well. If Koala was there when all of that's happening, like she's there when they're freeing Arlong and the others, because Koala, of course, has that past with Arlong and the Sun Pirates and Fisher Tiger and everything. I can see Arlong yelling at Koala for what happened to Fisher Tiger, and then Jinbei yelling back, she was a child, she had no part in that. That was not her fault. And then, Koala is the only human that we are aware of that has the mark of the sun on them. That has that mark that all of the sun pirates had and Arlong and everything had. She is the only one that we are aware of that has that mark because of Fisher Tiger. I don't think we've seen any other humans that have been given that brand. The only other ones that would be remotely possible to have that brand would be the Boa sisters, and they don't, because we've seen their backs and they don't have that brand on them. They have the hoof, but they don't have the brand of the Sun Pirates to like hide it. They would be the other humans that would most likely have it, but they don't, which I think I pointed out in a previous video. But Nami and Koala being there and being the ones that are like freeing all of the fishmen and freeing all of the slaves and everything like that, and like seeing Arlong and like Arlong taking a moment to realize that like this grown woman in front of him that was Koala, was that little girl that that he traveled with and didn't really want anything to do with, way back when, him seeing Koala and seeing how far she's come and that she's using Fishman karate and everything like that, and that she has become this revolutionary, that she has been doing everything she can to try to like fix the broken world, and seeing that Nami has become so much stronger than he ever imagined she would be, and seeing the two of them and having them be the ones to free him would be an amazing way of Oda to wrap up that part of Arlong's story. Because we've seen so many of the other, former adversaries, some that became allies, some that became stronger and were still enemies. We've seen a lot of them. But we have not seen where Arlong is, and that would fit very well, I would think, into Oda's storytelling for helping tie up those loose ends for Nami, because I think she at least has the right to be able to look Arlong in the eye again and show that she's not scared of him anymore. Show that she doesn't have that fear that she used to have when it came to him. And see how much Koala has gone from being this, this timid little girl that was a slave, that was freed, to being this, we've seen part of that with how much of she's become as like this warrior, amazing fighter and everything within the Revolutionary Army, very high ranked officer. And having them and Jinbei be, having them be the ones there to like help free all of the slaves and like interacting with Arlong again would be a very good poetic way of like ending that part of that story for like Arlong, and having Nami and Koala both find some form of closure in that regard. And then, Nami goes home and sees, Nojiko and Genzo again and everything, and tells them that she found Arlong again and what happened to him. And like they're just like, what happened? Is he still alive? She's like, yes, he's still alive. And this is what happened. This is how I interacted with him. And I knew more about who he was then. Because there is no way that Arlong would have told Nami about what happened with Fisher Tiger. And we know that because she didn't know any of it when she was talking with Jinbei. Also, Oda probably didn't have like that part of the story determined when he was writing, East Blue. For that connection there. But, so that's what I wanted to talk about in regards to Nami and Arlong and Koala a little bit at the end, with like that coming into play. That is what I wanted to mention. I wanted to make this video for a little while, and I just figured, well, we got a 2-week break now, so I'll do it here. If you have thoughts for how that interaction between Nami and Arlong could go, please comment. Because I don't see Nami being that scared little girl anymore for everything that happened with Arlong and everything, for, as much as she's gone through and grown, not just in her own power, but like as an individual in regards to her own maturity and everything that she's, emotionally experienced up to that point in time about the world and her crew and everything else. And just, seeing all of that, I can very much see that being the way that she would interact with Arlong at that point in time. should that interaction ever happen. Having Jinbei there, having Koala there, the main part is having Nami there against Arlong and like seeing that interaction where she has to like face this demon that has been part of her life since she was a child. And yes, Luffy helped start freeing her from those chains and from those bonds and everything that happened there. But there's still a lot of emotional trauma that goes into that. Um, um, Eri from My Hero Academia is a very good example of this, with the fact that it took her a long time and she's still not fully over what happened during her past, but that's a good example of that, where yes, Nami's been through a whole lot and she's grown as a person and everything, but I'm sure it's time. She still has a nightmare that comes up every now and then about her mother and about Arlong, and that maybe at some point in time she just can't sleep, and maybe she ends up telling not Robin about it, and Robin just helps her calm down. And this is a moment where Nami finally gets to face this demon that, yes, while he was an effective part of molding her into who she was, it was also a very torturous process for her to go through all of that. So that's what I wanted to talk about. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.